Well, good morning. It is morning here where I am. Welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. Today, we get to chat with Alexandra Hoffmann, who is the founder and CEO of Crisis LI. And I am no stranger to crises, as many of you know, having been in the World Trade Center on September 11th. And so I'm really anxious to hear what Alexandra has to say and to just chat about crises and whatever else comes along. She's also a mom, and that could be a crisis in of itself. And I'll bet she has stories about that. So we get to listen to all of that and hopefully learn some things and just have a little bit of fun today. So Alexandra, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset.
Thank you very much, Michael, for having me with you today. I'm really honored and very excited as well.
Now, you are located where?
I'm actually located in France. I'm French.
So right now it's what time where you are?
It is almost 6 p.m. my time.
So you're 8 hours ahead of us.
Yes.
Or actually 9 hours ahead of us, because it is almost 9 a.m. here where I am. So that's okay. That makes life fun. Well,
Yes.
We're really glad that you're here. Why don't we start by maybe you telling us a little bit about kind of the early Alexandra growing up and all that kind of stuff?
All right.
That kind of stuff makes it pretty general, doesn't it?
It's super general. And I'm like, okay, where should I start? So,
wherever you wish, at the beginning.
All right. So I was born and grew up in Paris for until my 20s, I would say. So nothing, I would say nothing exciting around that, right? And it started getting really exciting, at least for me, when I started traveling around the world after finishing my master's degree in law back in France. And I had an opportunity to start traveling to Asia, more specifically Vietnam and then Hong Kong, and that really triggered a whole different life for myself, to discover the world, to learn about new cultures, to learn about a new job, which actually led me to where I am today, 25 years later. So that's it for me in a really, really small nutshell. And apart from that, I'm really a part of a family with an older sister, a younger brother, and we had a pretty happy life. So everything went smoothly for me when I was young, I want to say.
No major crises or anything like that, huh?
We had some, like every family, I want to say.
Yeah.
I mean, my sister got sick when we were young, and that triggered a major crisis. Maybe that started planting a seed at the time about crisis management and the will to care for others and to care for the human beings, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, apart from that, we had a very regular life, I want to say.
So you have two children. How old are they?
I have a 6-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl.
Oh, probably great ages, and the crises will start when they start dating.
Yeah, I mean, we've had crises as well since they were born, but some very normal crises, I want to say.
Very
Nothing critical. Yeah, very normal crisis.
There's a husband to go along with all of that?
Yes, there is one. We have our crisis as well, so it's
yes.
So yeah, I mean, that's life, right?
It's
ups and downs, and that's part of the journey, right?
It is. Well, so tell me about the travels. You said you traveled to Asia and so on. What prompted that? Going to Asia and other places.
So I actually went to the US as well. And what prompted me to travel there is really the fact that I'm actually having a crisis because my kids want to barge in the room right now, which is completely unexpected. So my husband saved the day, but let's see for how long. No, I started traveling to Asia because I had this opportunity, and then moved to the US right after 9/11. Okay. Because I wanted to start studying corporate security. And I knew that there was a college back in New York which is specialized in this. So I really wanted to take this opportunity, especially after 9/11, to really go there and dive into this topic and really get the knowledge. I don't want to say the expertise at that point, right? Because it was really early in my career, but at least learn as much as I could about this topic to then start my career in corporate security.
Mm-hmm.
Back in Asia, I was mostly focused on law, work, basically, because I was originally a law student, right? So, but really what triggered me to travel to the US was really to study corporate security. And originally, you have to know that I studied law back in France because I wanted to be a police officer. And in France, when you want to become a police officer, you have to go through law school. Basically, it's mandatory. I know it's very different in the US. But my mind changed when I started traveling, and I realized I wanted to discover the world and speak English all the time, and learn new things and discover new cultures, basically.
Yeah. And you know what? That's interesting. I've talked to a number of people who have said the same sorts of things. When they got to travel or when they wanted to travel, they very much enjoyed learning about new cultures and different kinds of environments and different kinds of people. And I know even around the United States, and I've had the honor of doing that, and I've traveled to a number of countries overseas and so on as well. It is always fun to learn about new people and who they are and where they are and what they do and why they're the way they are. And it certainly is not up to me to judge one kind of people as opposed to someone else. Everyone's customs are different. And that's what makes it so much fun, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I need diversity. That's that's how I feed myself, my soul, I want to say, right? So that's why meeting those diverse cultures and people is a requirement for myself.
Outside of France, what's the favorite place that you've been to that you really liked? Or do you have one?
New York,
Oh, New
definitely,
York. Yeah.
definitely, definitely.
New York is
I, I
such
spent
a
I spent enough years there to fall in love with it, and yeah,
yeah. There's nothing like New York.
yeah.
You're absolutely right. I mean, there are other places that are so much fun as well, but there's nothing like New York. It's a great place to be and a great place to go. And it really is a city that, as Frank Sinatra sings in the song, it doesn't sleep because there's
Yeah.
always something going on. And I remember for a while when I lived back in the area or when I would travel there, places like the Carnegie Deli, which unfortunately closed, which I'm sad about, but were open till like 4 in the morning, and then they opened
Mm-hmm.
again at 6 or 6:30. But they were open most of the time. And other places there's always activity, which is just kind of cool. And one of the things I really liked about New York, and I don't know how much it's changed in the last 20 years since, 19 years since we moved, you could order any food or anything to be delivered, which for me was very convenient, even being in the World Trade Center, because I could order from some of the local delis and not necessarily have to go down, and they would bring food up, which was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's yeah. I mean, I have so many memories there, and there is no place like that. I can't say that I would live there again, especially with young kids, right? Right
Yeah,
now. But it's New York is part of me now. It's been part of me for many, many years now.
it's definitely an interesting and wonderful place to go. And
Yeah.
I can very well understand why it's a favorite place of yours. It's one of my favorite places as well. If we had to move back to that area, we lived in Westfield, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I did, and it was a better place to live for us because my wife, being in a wheelchair, also needed a more accessible house than we would typically find in New York City. She has now passed on.
Yep.
She did last November, but we've talked several times that if we ever had to go back there, she'd rather live in the city. It's a lot more convenient. It's a lot more accessible. And there's just so much not only to do, but so many conveniences to get her whatever she would need. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's everything is practical there.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really pretty cool. So for you, um, so you've been involved in the law and corporate security, and I can see where those two concepts actually blend together. I assume that you would agree that they really can dovetail upon each other in some ways, and knowing about the law and then dealing with security and so on is something that you have a lot of background to be able to address.
Mm-hmm. It's especially because I studied criminal law, right? So we're not supposed to, I mean, we're not meant to chase criminals within the corporate environment, right? But it is connected in a way, and especially from a value standpoint, I would say. Also the mindset. And we do have sometimes to conduct investigations, and also the fact that we have to constantly prepare for disruptive events, but also respond to those disruptive events. It's highly connected. It's a very different job, but it's very connected. Let's put it this way.
Yeah. So in terms of dealing with crises and so on, and we joked a little bit about it earlier, but but in all seriousness, what are some things that led you to really being interested in and wanting to work in the arena of crisis management, whether crises of your own that you've had to face, or just what kinds of things shaped your experience to want to do this?
It's that's what I was telling you. That's the reason why I was telling you at the beginning. Maybe my childhood planted a seed on this, with my sister getting sick and us having to adjust. I don't know. I don't know for sure, but I know that 9/11 was definitely an event that triggered me to say, I want to help serve the corporate sector, to help protecting the people working for the corporate sector, right?
Yeah.
So that when a disruptive event happens, 9/11 or anything else, professionals are there to assist them and make sure that everything is done to the best of our capabilities, basically, to protect and serve, but within those private organizations.
Tell me a little bit about your thoughts concerning September 11th and what you observed in terms of what was successful and maybe not so successful about managing that crisis.
Oh, wow.
I know that's a pretty open-ended question, but it's a fascinating one, I would think, to talk about.
It is a fascinating one. Well, for one thing, it was a long time ago. Yeah. I must say, unlike you, I was not in New York at the time, right? I was actually sitting in Hong Kong, but when it happened, and I think I was basically, I don't know what word to use actually, by seeing what was happening and not understanding how we could not see this coming, right? At the same time, I've read a few things since, including one book that I always recommend my clients or anyone who attend my workshops or conferences to read, which is called The Ostrich Paradox. And it's a book that talks about, among other things, 9/11, and that explained that a lot of cognitive biases went into the process of risk management at the time when it comes to preparing for those disruptive events, right? So I think, from what experts are saying, I think one of the big things is that cognitive biases played a huge role in this lack of preparation, I want to say. And it's not a lack of preparation, it's in this event, I want to say, right? But at the same time, when you have planes landing at the top of building, there's not much you can do to prevent the building from collapsing, right? But so yeah, it's a difficult question, I want to say.
Yeah, it is. And it's a challenge. When you say cognitive bias, what do you mean by that?
So when as risk managers and as humans, okay, that's what the ostrich paradox covers this area and talks about 6 cognitive biases, which are humans. Okay, it's everyone has those cognitive biases, but as risk managers, the authors highlight those 6 cognitive biases. All right, and some of them are the myopia bias. It means, which is, we are not meant, our brain is not meant to see far ahead in the future. The thing is, when we manage risk, we are supposed to foresee the future. So we have to go against this cognitive bias to evaluate risks. So when you think of 9/11, that's one of the biases that went into play. But this specific bias, okay, myopia, happens in many other situations, right? Another thing is the bias of amnesia. We forget. So there were other situations where the World Trade Center had been attacked, as we know, right?
Yes.
And yet, you know what I'm saying?
I do.
This is human. Our brain is not meant. Our brain is just meant to focus on the now and here. And here and now, that's it, because it wants to make sure that that our life is not at stake, basically, and that we can survive, and that we can take care of our close family, let's say children, if we do have children, or at least partners, right? So apart from that, our brain has not been built to explore so far in the future and so far in the past. So when we analyze risks, that's something to really take into consideration. I'm just mentioning 2 of those cognitive biases, right? But there's also the herding effect, right? It's not going to happen. Think about COVID. Think about the war in Ukraine. It's the same. It's not going to happen. Something like this cannot happen. At the time, everyone thought that could have just happened in a Hollywood movie, right? It's So this book is really interesting. The ostrich paradox. It's very insightful, and we can talk about natural disasters as well. The Fukushima event, all those events.
But at the same
could
time,
have been. Tell me, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No. All those events. If we didn't have those cognitive biases built in, right, could have been handled differently. Mm-hmm. Foreseen differently, but we are who we are anywhere around the world, right? So we have to be aware about those cognitive biases, and I think that's the most important one. And in my work, I try to make my clients aware of these as much as possible, because these are really important in what we do.
But is that really the way we're wired, or is that a learned behavior? In other words, it seems to me, I've heard so many times throughout the years that people do have the ability to do what if, and that's in a sense what makes us different from dogs or other animals, that we do have the ability to do what if. But I'm wondering if it's really so much our brain is wired not to, since it's a concept that all of us talk about and some people swear by, or is it a learned behavior that we learn not to think that way?
From what I know, because I'm not a neuroscientist, so okay, don't quote me on this.
That's okay.
From what I've learned, scientific studies show that it's actually the way our brain functions. Okay. Now, there is actually one bias that's called the confirmation bias. Okay, the confirmation bias is, let's say, I'm telling you want to think about something red, okay? And when you're going to start looking around, everything's going to be red all of a sudden. Or you're going to start talking about a subject, like, let's say we talk about confirmation bias or any cognitive biases for what we say, okay? I can bet anything that in the next coming days, you're going to hear more about cognitive biases as well. Because you're going to your brain will be much more attentive to those signals, basically. Yeah. So in a way, yes, it is trained behavior, but at the same time, this is also how your brain is wired to be more attentive to signals that it recognizes, basically, right?
Right. The problem I see, and this isn't disagreeing with you because I think it affirms what you say, is that at the same time, we think that, so September 11th happened, it'll never happen again, or we maybe hope it won't happen again. And I think that we do become a little bit more attentive and attuned to trying to look for the signs, because so much of our world now talks about it, that we're in a sense forced to think about it regularly. And so we do. Also, I think without getting into politics, we have any number of people who are supposed to know better who say, well, it won't happen again. And so we don't have to worry about that kind of thing, or they go overboard the other way. Of course, it'll happen again, and we completely have to isolate ourselves from the rest of the world. Otherwise, we're going to be victims again. And in all of those cases, what it seems to me is that in reality, September 11th occurred. There are probably a lot of good reasons, well, a lot of reasons why it occurred. We as a society didn't choose to understand some people as well as perhaps we should have. I'm not convinced, having read the September 11th report, that with all of the information, we would have been able to predict and stop September 11th from happening, because I just don't think the information was there. That's one thing that the bad guys did very well. And the bad guys aren't a religion. The bad guys are a bunch of thugs who acted in the name of religion. But nevertheless, they did what they did. And I think that what we also try to do is to put things out of our minds. I had a customer in New York around the time of September 11th. And we had been talking with them about, it was a law firm, about purchasing tape backup systems to keep all of their data backed up and they would store it off site. September 11th happened, and I happened to call the customer the next week to see how they were doing. And they were in Midtown Manhattan, so they weren't directly affected by the World Trade Center. But the person that I had been working with said, well, my boss said, we're not needing to buy any backup systems now because September 11th happened, so it'll never happen again. So we don't have to back up their data, which is really crazy on one side. And on the other side, short-sighted, because you shouldn't do it for the reason of whether or not the World Trade Center happened or didn't happen. You should do it to protect your data.
That's myopia. That's also optimism. Optimism is also a cognitive bias. The authors mention in the book, The Ostrich Paradox, that we want to hope for the best. So without getting into politics, I think one of the big bias that comes into play is this, because no one wants another 9/11.
Sure.
No one wants a COVID crisis. No one wants the war in Ukraine, at least normal people, right?
Normal people don't. There were not normal.
No one wants that, thousands of people dying and things, and no one wants that, right? So I think, and I want to hope, maybe that's my own optimism bias talking, but I want to hope that that's the case for most politics, right? It's they simply have this optimism bias, plus the enormous workload that they have to deal with, right? So you combine everything, the cognitive biases plus the workload, and that's a recipe for disaster. I have plenty of examples in France of disruptive situation that happened with people's lives at stake, and it's just the workload of intelligence services was so much that the intelligence was basically at the bottom of the pile, and no one saw it or paid attention to it. It's a lot of things, basically. It's a lot of things.
It's interesting. We over here have been keeping up, to at least to some degree, with the issue in France about raising the retirement age that Macron wants to do. And he wants to raise it from 62 to 64 as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but over here, the minimum retirement age is 65, and they've talked about, and even Social Security over here has changed its rules slightly, but it's a little bit difficult to understand the vehemence that people are displaying, raising the retirement age from 62 to 64 over there. And there must be some solid reasons for it, but nevertheless, that's, I got to believe, a major crisis that y'all are dealing with over there.
It's complicated, and I'm not the thing is, I'm also a business owner. So retirement is not really a topic in my mind, I want to say.
I understand.
Right?
And
I come from a family of business owners as well. So culturally, I was not really raised in an environment where we would just focus on when we're going to stop working. My dad was a really hardworking man, and I think I am too. I have no plan of stopping working, basically, because I love what I'm doing. I may adjust as I'm growing old, but as long as I'm healthy, I'm fine. And I'm giving you this response because there's a big gap in French society between people like myself, I want to say, because I want to say, a service job, basically, where I'm only using my brain to do my work, right? I'm not using my body. So my body is not being, I want to say, worn down over the years. But I think a lot of the complaints are coming from people working for companies and industries where, they have to actually use their body every day to carry heavy things around, to work all night, to care for children, to care for elderly. And obviously doing this until a certain age is getting more and more difficult, right? So I think that's where the gap comes from or I know that's where the gap comes from in France. It's that this part of the population, and rightfully, I want to say, wants to be able to stop early enough when their body is not completely broken, basically. That's really if I want to summarize.
Right. And I figured as much that would be the reason that most people would take.
Yeah.
Right or wrong, that's the feeling.
Yeah, exactly. So things have calmed down now, but we have other things. We have in France, we have disruptive events on a regular basis. I don't know if you saw what happened this past couple of weeks with the demonstrations at night going on. Not demonstrations, the how to say, with the youth being really, really angry because there was a murder of a young kid.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So riots. So that's the word I was looking for. Sorry. So there we've had very, very violent riots over the past couple of weeks. It's complicated, very societal, very complex societal subjects, very complex subjects.
Is that still going on? I haven't.
No. It's calmed down. Okay. It's calmed down. No. Yeah.
If I can just go to an off the wall kind of thing, we've had our share over here of riots for one reason or another, and we've had our share of that kind of crisis and so on. The thing I have never understood personally, and it's just me, I think, or at least I'm going to say it's my mind anyway, is I understand why people may be very upset and why they riot. Why do they go around looting and breaking into stores and offices and other things and stealing things and damaging things that oftentimes don't even have anything to do with the subject of what they're rioting about?
Yeah, I know. And I disagree. I wholeheartedly disagree with that way of demonstrating, basically. Wholeheartedly disagree with that. I mean, we can't be angry, like you said, and they had people had every right to be angry with the situation, but as far as damaging people's goods and life projects and life savings for many of them, that makes me angry.
Does anyone have an explanation for why that kind of behavior takes place?
I guess they will have to put it on someone, right?
Yeah,
They have
I guess
to.
so. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess they have to. When we're really, I know when I'm really angry, which doesn't happen every day, obviously, and fortunately. Yes, if I'm not conscious of what's going on, I can have a tendency of, looking for someone who's responsible, but me, right?
But me is exactly right. We
Yeah,
never look at what could we
yeah,
do or what could we have done.
yeah,
And that there's not always a good answer that says that there's a lot we could have done. Take over here the thing that we saw a few years ago, the George Floyd murder.
yeah,
Most of us were not in a position to do anything about that. I suppose some people could have attacked or forced that officer to leave George Floyd alone and not kneel on his throat for 9 minutes. And some of the officers should have done that. I don't know whether they have any guilt for not doing that, but still, there was so much that happened after that that really ended up being not related directly to it, like damage and looting and all that, that is so frustrating. And it seems to happen all the time. And I've never understood that kind of behavior. And I could be angry and frustrated, but still, it's strange that that kind of thing goes on and makes the crisis worse.
yeah. And I think whether it's for the George Floyd crisis or what happened in France a couple of weeks ago, I think it's just communities being really tired of that level of, really high level of frustration that's been going on for years and years and years for many reasons, justified or not justified, right? But
Yeah.
I know that in France, we have a community of people who are actually really frustrated about what's going on. Build this gap, building and building and building day after day between the rich and the poor, between who can have access to everything and who can not have access to everything. Yes, we have a free health system in France, and free school. And if I summarize, it's never completely 100% free, but it's nothing compared to what you guys have in the US. Okay, just put some perspective here. But at the same time, there's still so many things which are not fair in the system itself. There's still a huge lack of diversity in the way we approach a lot of topics. And yeah, it's like I said, these are really complex matters. That's why it's hard to just pose a judgment on everything, right? It's really easy when we see things like this to watch the news and say, oh my God, he's wrong or she's wrong or whatever, or I agree. It's I think it leaves a lot of food for thoughts. And when I bring it back to myself, right, to say, okay, what can I do? The one thing I tell myself is, okay, what can I do to raise my kids properly? And what can I do to serve, my fellow human beings and my friends and my clients in the best way I can to promote a different energy, really? That's really what I try to do. It's really what I try to do because, of course, like you said, most of us cannot have much impact on such events, right?
Right.
But I really think that if a lot of us put a lot of positive and a different energy out there, we'll see different things happening as well.
You talk a lot about diversity. So I gather that and from your own experiences, you talk about it. I gather that you believe that diversity and experiencing diversity is an extremely valuable thing to do.
Yeah.
And it leads to hopefully better grounding people and making them more resilient. Does that kind of sum it up?
It, yeah, but also more resilient, but more than that, much more open-minded, much more open-minded. Because I think a lot of the frustration that may come from anyone, is about not the fact that we don't know, when we don't know, when we don't understand something. So when we don't understand something, we're scared of it, right? We can get scared of it really easily. Whereas,
yeah, go ahead.
Whereas when we try to face diversity, embrace diversity, and learn about diversity, asking questions and trying to understand others' perspectives and points of view and ways of thinking, the opens a completely new world.
And that's why I said what I did earlier about September 11th and our not understanding people. We could go back and look at history and the way we dealt with Iran many years before September 11th and before even the revolution and so on. And we, as I think over here, of people viewed it as being so far out of our sphere of knowledge and somewhat influence that it was really irrelevant. And that's the problem, that we don't tend to learn. And I think that goes back to something you said, that a lot of people don't learn to necessarily take a wider view of things.
Yep. And that's why diversity is such a big topic in in my life, basically, right? And especially since I've become a business owner, because I need to be challenged constantly to make sure that when I'm thinking, being a business owner is very lonely, right? So because you have no one, I have a team, but they're not here to tell me what to do, right? I'm supposed to lead, right? And so I'm actually looking for teams who can actually challenge what I'm thinking, what I'm asking, what I'm saying, what I'm doing, not constantly, but on a regular basis, right? And also with my close family, I'm actually asking them to challenge me on a regular basis regarding my decisions and all of this, because we are blind, right? It's super easy to have blind spots all the time because of those cognitive biases, because of our own fears, because of many, many, many psychological things that go on in our brain. So that's why I'm a huge, huge advocate of diversity.
What do you think makes a good leader, whether it's crisis or whatever? You've talked about leadership a lot. What do you think are the qualities or traits for a good leader?
There are many that I could start listing, but if I had to pick one category, that would be, as we say in French, savoir-être, which is being, right? It's to know how to be. Knowing what to do is the easy part, I want to say, especially as we build on experience and as we grow older and so on and so forth. I'm not saying that those decisions are always easy, but, as far as being, it's much more complex. And I think that's the most fascinating piece of leadership, because it's about us interacting with others. It's much more complex because every single human being is unique. So even if we have an experience with certain kind of people, it's always going to be different with other people we encounter, right?
Yeah.
So focusing on being on top of doing is, I think, one of the biggest skills and responsibility a leader has.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I also think that knowing what to do is a very difficult thing. And I think one of the good skills that any good leader has is, going back to what you said, also allowing people to, whether you want to use the word challenge or state their own opinions, because they may know something about what to do in a particular situation that is even better than what you know. And a good leader has to be able to recognize that and look at all aspects. And I know when I was leading sales forces, one of the things that I told every salesperson I ever hired was, I'm your boss, but I'm not here to boss you around. I'm here to add value to what you do to help you be more successful. So we need to learn to work together. And I think that is such an important thing that many people who are in positions of authority never really understand.
I completely agree with you, Michael. And I want to add to what I said before and what you just said, that when I talked about being, it's being humble, among other things.
Yeah.
Being humble. But I didn't want to summarize leadership to humility. Right. So it's being humble. It's being a good communicator. It's being able to interact with different cultures, with different ways of thinking. It's also being able to admit responsibility, to admit mistakes, to celebrate. Right. So it's all of this together, so that when decisions need to be made, it becomes easier and smoother. It's not going to be perfect. Okay.
Yep.
I always say that there's no such thing as perfect, especially when we talk about dealing with crises, because that's also, I think, one of the biggest caveats of a lot of reading materials I see is that we think there's an end to it, right? And I think there is no such thing. It's always a journey. It's always a learning journey for every leader I've read about or discussed with or met in person, no matter what. It's always a learning curve. Sometimes we have ups, sometimes we have downs, and sometimes we succeed, sometimes we mess up. So that's why, so that's why one of the things I really put forth is the fact that it's a journey. It's not the end.
And I think the times when perhaps someone messes up are the best times, because those are the times that drive home the point. Something to learn here, even though there's something to learn even when you're extremely successful. How can you maybe do it better? But we tend to focus on the mess up times more. And that's fine. But still, it's not that we're a failure. It's that we need to learn and grow from it. And I suppose that gets back to picking on politicians. I'm not sure they do always a great job of that, but nevertheless, it's what any good leader should really do. And I think that it's a crucial thing. As you said, it's a journey, which is really important. When did you form Crisis Ally?
So I formed it at the end of 2018. And at first, it was Alexandra Hoffmann Consulting, and it became Crisis Ally in 2020 during COVID. Because when COVID hit, I changed everything: the strategy, the business model, everything. And I also changed the identity. And I really didn't want the company to be about me. I wanted to be about what we do and how we can serve our clients, basically.
Yeah. And the pandemic, the difference between the pandemic and the World Trade Center is that the pandemic, whether a lot of us necessarily recognized as much as we could have or should have, is it more directly affected everyone than the World Trade Center. Yes, the world shut down for a few days after September 11th, especially the financial markets and so on. And yes, it was something that was an issue for most all of us. And I think it's true to say that the world stopped. But then it started again. And with the pandemic, we went through a different kind of situation that affected so many people. And I think a lot of us maybe didn't think it through as well as we could have. And I hope it doesn't happen again, but I'm not sure that that's the case. I know that in this country, we have, and I've been reading over the last couple of days, that deaths associated with the pandemic have brought the whole picture back down to, we're experiencing the amount of deaths we normally do, even pre-pandemic. So for the world, perhaps the pandemic is over. Maybe, or at least this one is over, but I guess we'll see.
It's hard to predict such things. I'm actually more concerned about natural disasters. If you want
Yeah.
my take on this one, much more concerned because that's also easy. It's a confirmation bias. Now that we've seen 9/11, now that we've seen the pandemic, now everyone is focused on this. Same with cyber attacks, basically, right?
Yeah.
Everyone is focused on those because we've experienced them. I think we ought to be extremely cautious with natural disasters and what nature has in store for us because between the heat waves and we had some major wildfires just a year ago where I live. I know you've had your share as well. Canada has had its share recently as well. It's so professionally speaking, from a risk perspective, natural disasters, I think, are high on my list.
And of course, I agree with you. Of course, the question is, what can we do about it? And again, I think for me, I think it starts with getting back to dealing with some of the cognitive biases and to recognize we have to deal a little bit with what if. We may not be able to predict a particular natural disaster, but we certainly can be more aware and make some preparations.
And be less surprised. Be less surprised.
Absolutely.
Because surprise is what takes a toll on everyone. You know, especially bad surprises, right? Like that. So being more aware of these and like you said, and being less surprised by those events, it's much less traumatizing. And it's much easier to cope right away and to make decisions instantly rather than just, freezing.
Here in the United States, and I'm sure elsewhere, we hear a lot about earthquakes. And Dr. Lucy Jones here in Southern California and others talk about predicting earthquakes or seeing earthquakes before they reach us. And now they're talking about maybe 10 to 60-second warning, which people would say, oh, that's not very much. But that's incredible compared to the way it used to be. And if we continue to encourage the science, we'll probably find other things that will help give us more warnings. I know in Iceland, they're actually learning how to do a better job of predicting volcanic eruptions. And they're doing a really incredible job. And like with anything, it's very expensive right now. The technology is a little bit challenging. But if we encourage the science, it will improve.
That's interesting because that's one of the takeaways from the Ostrich Paradox book that's mentioned about Fukushima. One of the expert scientists had said, if we invest in this technology, we'll have what we need to be prepared for such an event. Because it was very expensive at the time, they said no to it.
Yeah.
And then Fukushima happened.
And Fukushima wasn't
because they couldn't perceive the
tidal wave.
No, that's not what I want to say. They couldn't perceive the risk as being high enough. They measured the impact as being big, but the probability was so low for them. So it was like, okay, we're not going to invest millions or whatever, right, for something that has a super low probability from happening.
And then it did. Which is, of course, the issue. I was at Fukushima, no more than a year after it happened. But I hear exactly what you're saying. And we need to recognize that things do occur and that we have to learn to address them. And again, it gets back to this whole idea of what if. And the reality is, I think there are people who have a gift of learning to deal with what if. And we ought to honor and recognize that more than we do. Of course, some of them are not really dealing with what if they're making things up, but there are people who do what if and who do it very well. And a lot of the scientists are specifically trying to address that kind of issue. Well, what if this happens? And what's the theory behind this? And how can it change? And we just don't address science nearly as much as it should.
And I want to add, from where I am, I've been working with the corporate sector 22 years now. I've never met a scientist to talk about risks like this.
Mm-hmm.
So this is also something to understand. There are so many silos that we ought to break eventually when we talk about, managing, responding to disruptive events.
Yeah.
Because communities don't meet, and some communities would need to meet to increase the level of awareness on so many things. Like we're talking about risk, science, and scientific studies and knowledge, right?
Right.
Of course, I'm curious enough, so I go on Google now or any other platform to learn as much as I can. But when you put yourself in a chief security officer's shoes or a chief risk officer's shoes, he has no time to do such thing, right? And the thing is, because we're used to think in a silo, I've never attended any team meeting where we've invited over a scientist to talk about, I don't know, the risk of AI, the risk of natural disasters, the risk of cyber, the risk of anything. Never.
Why is that?
I don't know, because it's I think it's just we don't think about it.
Mm.
And by just discussing it with you, I realized that's a huge gap. I've actually started bridging that, with putting my small stone to this siloed world. I've actually started seeing this, acknowledging this between universities and the corporate world. So I've started teaching at universities, okay, because I realized that there were so many things I wasn't taught back at university, and I wished I had known before, earlier in my career, so things could have been, I want to say, easier, right, for myself, for my teams. So I'm like, okay, let's go to university and teach students what I've learned along the way to bridge that gap. But that's not so common.
Mm-hmm.
That's not so common. And by just discussing it with you, I realized that we don't talk to the scientific community.
An area to work on.
Yeah, an area to work on. Unless, I know people who have PhDs and degrees like this, and of course they are part of the scientific community, but having a PhD is not being a scientist,
no,
right? So, no. So yeah, you get my point, because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
I do. No, I hear what you're saying. What's an example of where Crisis LI has really made a difference in what a company does?
So I think what we try to do each time we serve a client is really to make at least the teams who are supposed to work in this on these topics, on these critical topics, more resilient, more agile, and more adaptable to more sustainable, I want to say, right? I.e., we don't want people to crash. We want people to be able to sustain protracted emergencies, protracted situation, right? So that's how we want to make a difference with the client we serve. And it's really about aligning the people behind one vision and one mission. So that's what we do when we serve clients. I have one specific example in mind where we were working with a team, and there were a lot of misalignment around the mission, the vision, around security, crisis management, business continuity, all those resilience related topics, right? Risk management as well. And we helped the team align on these topics, basically. So, which I think will have some positive impact on the company as a whole.
So for you, looking ahead, what do you think is the most exciting thing about the future for Crisis LI and what you're doing and where you're headed?
The most exciting thing is that we're growing. I mean, revenue is growing, so that's really, really exciting. And it's growing really, really a lot. So I'm trying to plan for that and foresee how to handle what's coming, basically. And so I'm trying to envision new partnerships, I want to say, and also maybe hiring people for the company. So that's something I'm thinking about for 2024, 2025, because it's really it's really growing now.
And that's exciting. And there's
Yes.
going to be room for what you do for a long time. Have you written any books or any other online kinds of things that not yet? Haven't done that yet, huh? Sticking with the ostrich. Fair enough.
No, I've written articles, but I mean, writing a book, it takes time, and I have decided not to put my energy on this at this point in my life.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Besides, you have 2 children to worry about, and their crisis right now is that they didn't get to come in the room. So, is that leadership? Probably. Well, I want to figure out a way in the future to continue this. This is fun, and I would love to chat with you more. We've been doing this for a while now, and I don't want people to get too tired of us, but I think it's a fun discussion and one that we ought to continue in the future whenever you're willing to do it. But if people want to reach out to you, learn about Crisis LI and so on, how do they do that?
Hold on a minute, Michael.
Crisis.
Il y a des gens qui m'interrogent. Il y a des gens qui m'entendent. Tu attends 2 secondes. So the best way for people to reach me is on LinkedIn, Michael. Like you found me we found each other on LinkedIn. Right. It's LinkedIn. I'm all the time on LinkedIn all the time. It's I also have my website, my company's website, which is www.crisisally.com. But
what's your LinkedIn name that people can
AlexandraHoffmann.com.
Hoffman.
Yeah, I have to carry my daughter right now. You don't see her, Michael, but she's asking for my arms. But she's here and quiet.
Nothing wrong with having a daughter around. I closed my door so my cat wouldn't come in and yell at me. Well, I want to thank you very much for being here. This has absolutely been delightful, and I do want to do it again. And I hope all of you found this interesting. What's your daughter's name?
Ember.
Emerald?
Ember.
Yes. Ember, hello.
Yeah. She got here with the headphones. So,
that's true.
Yeah. Well, and she left now. Hello. She left. She got bored looking at the screen.
She's done now.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here, and I hope all of you enjoyed this. Please, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love your thoughts. Please reach out to me and give me your opinions and your views on all of this and anything else that you'd like to say. You can reach me at Michael H.I., MICHAELHI, at Accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com, or go to Michael Hingson, MICHAELHINGSON.com/podcast. I hope wherever you're listening that you will at least please give us a 5-star rating and write a good review. We really appreciate your positive and all of your comments. And I hope that you'll do that so that we can hear from you. And Alexandra, if you or any of you listening out there might know of someone else who ought to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, please let us know. We want to hear from you. We would love your suggestions and your recommendations. We value them, and we will talk with anyone who wants to come on. So once more, Alexandra, thank you very much for being here. I've really enjoyed it. I hope all of our listeners have. And I want to just express my appreciation to you for being here.
Thank you very, very much, Michael, for the discussion. It was very interesting. I must say you caught me off guard with a couple of questions, but that was also very interesting just for that. And thank you very much for having me on today and for listening. Thank you.